Well, hello, everyone. This is another in this series of Classmates in Conversation. And this year, 2024, we are the 40-year graduating class from RCSI, the bicentenary class. And I'm here with two of my classmates, Maria Gaard from Norway and Shaun Matthews from Australia. And it's really special because we are three students from three different continents. We had three different specialties amongst us. And the final kind of neat thing is that we spent our last 2 years in Dublin living together in the same household. So lots of shared memories and funny stories of both going to class and taking exams and whose time is it to cook dinner, things like that. So maybe the first question we'd like to ask is, what brought you to College of Surgeons, Maria?
I wanted to do medicine, and there was this ANSA, the Association for Students Abroad, that came to my secondary school to give information, and then I just really wanted to go abroad. I'm from a small place in Norway, and this was my chance to see the world.
Oh, nice. And you, Shaun?
Similar, actually. So I missed out on medicine by a few marks, 3 marks, in Sydney, and started doing veterinary medicine. And on the second day, we were dissecting greyhounds. And most of the students were ecstatic because that was their life dream. Mm-hmm. And I was dissecting the greyhounds thinking, I'm not sure this is really me. Mm-hmm. And so then I started to look at other options. And fortunately, a friend of my dad's knew about the College of Surgeons. Mm-hmm. He'd spent some time in Europe. And we applied, and we got in. I applied with his son and another friend. And I was 19. I'd never left Australia. To live in Europe was a dream. And I was very happy to pack my bags and head off.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
But how come, I just remember when you came as a group of 4. That means that you didn't know each other beforehand.
3 of us knew each other.
Yeah, you did?
Quite well, through sort of family connections. And another one, David, we met briefly before we came over. So there was the 4 of us, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. And since you were in Dublin, any special memories about maybe a favorite professor or any kind of knowledge that was passed on to you during your time here that you still remember to this day?
Favorite professor, I think Maura O'Brien was the one that really made an impact. She was so energetic, and we were a bit scared of her. And she loved the Australians.
Yes, she did.
So she always went to the card signing table where the 4 of you were, and ignoring us. You can't. No. So, but she was, she was a good teacher, and she was also into swimming.
That's right, and we were all quite good swimmers, so I think that was part of the connection.
Yes, and I also went to the swimming pool in
Ivy Baths.
Ivy Baths. Yeah. And I remember she was there, and she, was encouraging us to swim faster and faster for competitions. And I was saying, well, I'm just swimming for fun. And she said, all the girls are just swimming for fun. She wanted us to compete. So. And she had her daughter with her in the swimming pool, a young daughter, like 3 or 4 years old, that joined the swimming lessons.
Wonderful. Yeah, I really liked, I don't know if you did your pediatrics at Temple Street or Crumlin. Remember, there were 2 choices. Yeah. I went to Temple Street in that summer between the 2 years when we lived together at Mount Marion. And Dennis Gill was the professor there. And I still remember 2 things that he taught us early on for our pediatrics training. Basically, pediatrics, you need to be able to answer 2 questions. And if you can do that, you've got pediatrics. Is the child sick or is he well? Is the child normal or is he abnormal? And if you can dive into it in that kind of capacity, then you can really, direct your... And he also gave great clinical advice as we go around the wards. Is it bacterial or is it viral? And he gave a great if it's red, it's a virus. Whereas if it's more focal, or there's pus, it's bacterial. And just these really simple, basic, instructions like stayed with me through the years. So I really liked him.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know. Well, we agreed on Maura O'Brien.
Yeah,
right?
I think
Yeah.
Maura was a standout.
Yeah.
And very interested in students and their lives and caring, and she was sort of like a lovely auntie who was sort of
Embracing.
you knew she was there for you, and if there was any problems, she'd help and look after you. So that was a very she was a very nurturing kind of influence.
And then we all ended up leaving Dublin eventually in 1984 and went our different ways. Where did you go, Shaun?
So I went back to Australia and did my internship in Newcastle. It's a sort of city, quite a big city just north of Sydney. And after I finished my residency, I went off and I was very keen to work in India. For some reason, I'd studied it at school, Indian history. I was interested in the culture. So I went and got a job working as a volunteer doctor for the Tibetan government in exile in Dharamshala, which is a beautiful hill station in the Himalayas. So I lived in the Himalayas for 4 months and was part of a whole Tibetan community. And that was a pretty amazing experience. And, it was a small hospital. There was a lot of TB there. And we did little journeys up into the mountains to service little Tibetan communities. So we'd stay with them and monasteries. So I had a lot of my patients were monks, Tibetan monks. And that was a pretty special time. And the people were so appreciative. It was a small hospital, probably about 5 doctors. We had 2 Australians and the rest were Tibetan and trained in India.
Wow.
So that was a pretty special time. And probably the highlight was at the end of the 4 months, we had an audience with the Dalai Lama. And I got to ask him a question.
And what was that?
Well, at the time I was meditating. I actually learned how to meditate here in Dublin from a lovely woman from Clare. I learned transcendental meditation with a classmate, Joe Kidney. So I was already meditating and in a Buddhist community. And I soon realized that a lot of the Tibetans that I was working with, they didn't meditate. And I sort of assumed that they probably would be. And so I asked him, meditation is such a profound thing in Tibetan culture, especially amongst the monastics, but amongst the common people, nobody seems to meditate.
They probably didn't have time. I mean, they had to work for their living.
Yeah, well, he said, what? That's absolutely true. And we try and get them to meditate. I just won't go there. So he was very sweet guy, and so that was pretty special to have an audience for the Dalai Lama.
That's wonderful.
Wow.
So and then after that, I went back to Australia. And started getting more interested, especially after my time in India, in complementary medicine. And that culminated in going back and studying Ayurveda, which is the traditional medicine of India, at a university in India. And it's very much about healthy diet, lifestyle, understanding your body type. A lot of things I never really learnt about in medical school. And then its sister science is yoga. So I went and studied at a yoga school in Bihar, near Calcutta, in another part of India. So I've always felt very at home in India. And I felt there was a lot of things that I could learn there that weren't really held in so well in Western culture. And there was a lot of interesting things about healing that I was able to bring into my medical practice once I went back to Australia. So I've been teaching Ayurveda now at a College of Natural Therapies in Sydney for about 30 years, and also combining that in my medical practice. And I've written a couple of books on Ayurveda and healing as well. So I've gone down the complementary medical route, which has been really very interesting. A lot of fun. Met some great people. Travelled quite a lot as well. And now I actually take people to an Ayurvedic health retreat in Kerala in South India. Take groups there every year with a colleague of mine who's an Ayurvedic physician from South India. So India's been a big part of my journey. And the other thing I should say is I have a very good friendship with an Aboriginal elder, and we do a lot of work together in raising awareness around Aboriginal culture. which is very much honouring Mother Earth and how we can look after the planet better, learning from these ancient Indigenous peoples. So that's something I'm involved in, running courses and even had a festival honouring traditional knowledge systems and healing systems. Yeah. So yeah, that sort of ancient knowledge has always been very appealing to me, and how we can use the best of that as well as the best of Western modern medicine.
That's great.
Yeah, that's interesting. And me?
Yeah, what you do, Maria?
Yeah, what I did. Well, I went back to Norway and straight into internship at Lillehammer, which held the Winter Olympics in 1994. So that was, a big step from being a student. Suddenly we had lots of responsibility, and I still remember being called down because some of the tourist skiers, they had their shoulder out of place. And, I had been to surgeons, and if there was something they taught us, that was how to, get that shoulder back in place. So, so I did what we were taught. And then the rumor went that, this new interns, you just put the shoulder back. And I thought, we were meant to do that, but they, and the Norwegian students didn't do that. They called for their senior. Yeah. So that was my start. It was kind of a flying start, and it's a big step from, being part of a student community. And that took 6 months at the medical ward and 6 months with the surgical ward. And then we went off as a district training. So my place was in a place way up in the Arctic, right beside the North Cape. And then you were really left on your own, because 1,800 inhabitants, and in the winter the coastal steamer didn't go, the ferry didn't go, and the planes couldn't go, and you were just suddenly all alone with kids with asthmatic attacks, and we were 400 kilometers away from the hospital. And to go to the hospital, we had small planes where we followed the patients to the hospital. So, and even women in birth, we had to bring along in these small planes in really bad weather sometimes during the winter. But I was like 25, 26, and I wasn't mature enough to be afraid. But afterwards, I've been thinking that, that was kind of risky. And then I thought I would be a general practitioner. But after having done that for 6 months, I found that really difficult, because people came to me with symptoms that we never heard about in med school. That to me was common sense, like sore legs after running. And, I just couldn't find out what was, just ordinary symptoms and what was real. And I thought, I have to do something that's more concrete, more practical.
Yeah.
And I got my first surgical job, and I just felt very much at home. So since then, I've been training to become a colorectal surgeon, doing mainly the rectal cancer and colon cancer. And I get up every day and can't wait to get to work. I really like it, and
that's a great thing to be able to say.
Yeah, I think so. I feel very happy, or very lucky that I got that speciality. And at this reunion, a lot of people have been asking, when are you retiring? Are you retired? And I'm like, what? Well, I'm not there yet. I don't know when, but not yet.
I have to fess up. I'm retired.
Yeah, and you, Nancy?
Right out of RCSI, I got into a family practice residency program. I thought I wanted to do preventive medicine, and then I learned it was a little more non-clinical than what I was expecting. So I started a family practice residency program in Scottsdale, Arizona, which was I picked it partly because of its climate after 6 years of being in Dublin. I saw photos of blue skies and sunshine and palm trees. And it was at a small community hospital. There were just 6 residents per year for a 3-year family practice residency. And I did the obstetrics track within that family practice residency to train to do low-risk deliveries as a family practitioner when I completed the work. And upon doing those 3 years, which were wonderful, good training, and RCSI had prepared me well for that, I joined some of the other graduates who had also gone through that same residency to be a family practitioner. And I realized during that year that I was with them that I most enjoyed the Saturday mornings that we would rotate once a month, I guess, where we'd run like an urgent care within our clinic, and we wouldn't know what was coming in the door, as opposed to our usual scheduled patients. Oh, you're going to have Mr. So-and-so with hypertension at 2:30. With this Saturday morning clinic, they were usually, sick, and they came to us, and they were some of the other clinicians' patients, so I didn't know them. And so I found that like really exciting and interesting. And so that kind of steered me over more towards an urgent care type clinical practice. And I joined a large staff model HMO, in full-time urgent care. And they would use this was Cigna, they'd use their urgent care centers kind of like ERs, because it behooves them to try to keep, the really pricey stuff to the ER and the other stuff to us. And it was great. Anything and everything would come in the door, and we'd do these 12, 13-hour shifts, maybe 3 a week. And that was your week of clinical work. And it suited me fine, because at the time, my husband, who you both know because he lived at Moosley Hill as well as us, he had a job in wholesale Mexican travel. So we go down to Mexico all the time from Arizona. I hope I mentioned it was in Scottsdale, Arizona. So really like that. But he started getting homesick for Alexandria, Virginia, where he grew up, right near Washington, D.C. So we moved back there, and I thought, I'll get the same kind of job there, which I did. But I also heard about a job working with the State Department as a Foreign Service officer, as a Foreign Service regional medical officer. And that's what I applied for probably in the early 90s, to become a regional medical officer with the State Department. And that eventually came through, and that became my career for the next 24 and a half years. I was basically a U.S. Embassy doctor stationed overseas at our U.S. Embassy. Not every embassy could have a full-time physician, so we were considered regional. I'd be based at one embassy, and within that embassy, we'd have like a family practice clinic, and I was their family practitioner just like I would be back home. But then I would also travel to smaller embassies in the region, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, to look into the local medical resources that existed in that location, have a plan for any given eventuality that may fall one of our diplomats and their family members. Those were our patients. People often would get confused. Oh, you're over there to stamp out malaria. No, I was basically the family practice doctor to the diplomats and their family members. So I would have a career doing that, and I usually stay about 2 to 4 years in any given posting. Started off in Kazakhstan, the former Soviet Union, then went to India for 4 years, so I can share some of your interest in Ayurvedic and the magic of being in India. 4 years in Senegal, Francophone West Africa. Then back to Florida. Did I go to Florida then? Yes. Florida. I know that's not foreign. But they would put foreign service officers there down in Fort Lauderdale, and we would service our embassies in the Caribbean, the northern part of South America, and Central America, Mexico. So that was actually a very good tour. I really enjoyed that. And my husband was happy because he was living in the U.S. for a while. And then Lima, Peru.
In the U.S. while you were traveling? Or
we had our own home in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
And then I would fly to, Grenada. I got to go back to Grenada on official business. Trinidad, Jamaica, anywhere where we have a U.S. embassy or U.S. consulate, they were our mandate. And I was over, in charge of solving the medical problems of any of our folks. And the State Department medical program was very good in those years. They had a very strong clearance process. They wouldn't let someone with unstable diabetes go to, these places overseas. They had to be pretty,
robust.
Robust, and not very much geriatrics because there's mandatory foreign retirement in the Foreign Service at 65. So it was a pretty young, healthy population. But they still get appendicitis and heart attacks and car accidents. And someone last night was asking, oh, wow, that sounds terrifying. I said it was one of those jobs, 90% great fun and interesting, and the 10% terror factor. Because if you're in Almaty, Kazakhstan, and you're like the best game in town for people, it's a little nerve-wracking in that way. I mean, obviously I wasn't a surgeon, but finding the surgeon you could trust, and I only got 8 weeks of Russian before going to Kazakhstan. That's really not enough to talk clinically with anybody. It was more just for
basics.
Right, the basics. So it could be scary. And much of the time we would have to call in an air ambulance to and in Almaty, Kazakhstan, it was Helsinki. It was the closest.
Okay.
And that was going to be 9-10 hours. And sometimes by the time that air ambulance, and we had our finger in the dike during that time, by the time the air ambulance arrived, sometimes the child that we thought had epiglottitis and got to get him out, it was, a bad strep throat. Or sometimes when they came for the guy that was having a hemorrhagic bleed in the brain, he had died 15 minutes before the plane got there.
Really?
So,
Wow.
so it was like,
challenging.
It was very challenging, but it was great. It was really awesome. It was it kind of spoiled me though for practicing family medicine back in the U.S. after I retired, because with the State Department I could have as much time with my patients as I needed. I never had to worry about payment issues. I never wrote a script for OxyContin or had that sort of thing going on. I never learned how to do an electronic medical record. It was all soap notes that we learned from way back when. So I feel kind of spoiled. So I've kept a license, but I just use it now for volunteer type work.
But can I just ask you, because when you were in Scottsdale, that was at the same time that I was in the Arctic, Norway, and I remember receiving a pumpkin. And I was thinking, well, what to do with a pumpkin? Yeah, I'll phone Nancy. And I didn't check the time, so I rang you in Arizona, and Nancy was there with a really sleepy voice saying, who's this? And I said, it's Maria. Oh, yeah, okay, it's Maria in Norway. Oh, you, Maria. And all I wanted was to ask for this recipe for the pumpkin pie. And you said, oh, I thought it was one of my pregnant ladies going into labor. So that was that conversation. And then after that, I felt a bit bad. So I knitted, because at that time you had a little baby boy. So I knitted this cotton jacket for your baby and sent it to you. And then you said something about, oh, I hope he can use it because it's so warm down here. It might be too warm. And I was sitting there with my hats and scarves, and everything was minus 20 below.
Oh my
so
goodness.
Then I realized that you're in a completely different part of the world.
We used it, and we have several lovely photos. It was a beautiful pastel green, pastel yellow, and pastel pink. I remember it. We still have the sweater. We kept it. My son won't get rid of it. He loves it.
Really?
So,
That's great. He's holding on to it. Gorgeous.
But then when you had a son, and did you bring him along to all these places in the world? So he's been living in Kazakhstan and in South Africa and India and everywhere?
Yes, when you join the Foreign Service, your family members, your eligible family members are on your orders, and they get to travel with you and live overseas in the housing provided by the U.S. government. So Chris, my husband, and Dashel, our son, joined me on all of the tours where I was based overseas. When I was based in Fort Lauderdale, I told you about that unusual tour. And then one time I was based, a couple times, in Washington, D.C., you know, they're in the U.S.
But then he
they're on
had to
their own.
change schools.
He did.
Did he go to English or American speaking schools all the
He
time?
did pretty much. And one reason I picked 4 years, I tried to always lengthen my tour as long as they would let me. Because
Yeah.
I like staying in a place longer. And 4 years is a nice chunk of time.
Yeah.
And to get him schooling. And because one of the commonest reasons that maybe family members or employees might drop out of the Foreign Service is either because a spouse isn't able to get a job that suits all the hard work they've put into their career, or the children aren't quite adapting to being overseas, or school issues might be a problem. So, but our son did pretty good. I mean, he had his moments, but overall he did very, very good. And now he has friends from all over the world because, you know.
Like us.
Yes.
You know, the RCSI people also have friends from all over the world.
Exactly. Yes. Gosh. So
we didn't really say it, but when we came to Dublin, we were housemates.
Yes.
Roommates. We didn't mention that. We were talking about that before, but not to you. So that's another thing. We shared a house for 2 years, 5 people living in the house out in Mount Marion. We cooked common meals. I think we were very good.
Common vegetarian meals.
Delicious.
And vegetarian meals, And the place was called Muesli Hill because everybody was making jokes about us being,
at that time, we were a fairly rare
vegetarian.
phenomenon.
Yeah.
We were known as the Muesli Heads.
Yeah.
Hey, we're all alive and well to show how it works.
It works, yeah.
That's right.
You know, I just remember that time as being, you know, so nice and interesting and really good student life. And we had a garden. And Chris, he, at that time when he arrived, he stayed home, but then he did the garden. And also he had worked as a chef, so he really knew how to cook. So we were so lucky to have him in the house. But then he started working as a waiter in a Dublin
Comans
restaurant.
of Rathgar. I bet it's still there.
Okay, yeah. So then he was the one that worked, and we were students, and we were quite sensible. I mean, we were studying. There wasn't that many parties. We had Thanksgiving parties with lots of food, but it wasn't that drinking, dancing parties.
I think our main vice was coffee. We had very good coffee, I remember. We'd go to Bewley's and we'd get the finest Mountain Kenyan and Colombian. We always had great coffee.
Yeah. And then riding our bikes into town. That was the... 20 minutes, 25 minutes along the dual carriageway.
Yes.
So there wasn't many times that we went on the 46A.
No.
But even in that time, you know, that this was 1980. The bus was 46A. And today, in 2024, it's still the 46A. It runs every 8 minutes or something. So
really?
Yeah. I love that house. It had some older students from classes ahead of us, too.
We inherited it.
Yes. But if you guys remember, in maybe April or May of our final year, and we're all, getting nervous about the final clinical exams, one of the housemates we'd had, Nell McGovern, who was in the year maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of us,
I think, yeah.
She had moved down to Waterford to become a house officer down there. And she invited the 3 of us to go down there and stay with her and her husband and kids at that point, and take us into the Waterford Hospital and examine great patients that she'd selected for us. And, that gave us some confidence to come back.
And I saw the only patient I've ever seen with tetanus.
Oh.
You saw
in the
that
ward there. Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
tetanus patient. It's a farmer who'd cut his leg, I think, and soil had got in there. And so that's the only one I've ever seen.
Yes. Oh, gosh. Wow. But that was nice, too, to keep up with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you 2 are still working, and I'm retired. I think one of the things that's most interesting is to see how you see things going for your careers as they progress from here? Will you divert or stay with colorectal surgery or with Ayurvedic and Aboriginal? What sorts of ideas do you have for the future?
Well, one of the things that I'm in the process of creating with my business partner is an e-learning platform, and we're targeting women with adrenal fatigue, because I've been teaching Ayurveda at a College of Natural Therapies, as I mentioned, and one of the things that I've really observed is that for a lot of modern women, they go through the experience of pregnancy, which can be quite depleting. Then they're looking after young children, often the primary nurturer, not getting great sleep, and then often very quickly they're managing a career. So there's career, household, primary nurturer, children, and from the perspective of Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, there's a level of depletion which never gets redressed. And they take that into their middle years. And that can often manifest as endocrine or hormonal problems, gut problems, low-grade anxiety. And my experience working in general practice, where I'm bringing together Ayurveda, yoga therapy, and Western medicine, is that oftentimes women will come to me and they'll say, there's something wrong. I just don't feel myself. I'm running on empty. I'm snapping at my children. And all the blood tests are normal. And so for a lot of them, they don't get the kind of real validation and acknowledgement of their problems from Western medicine, because in Western medicine, you tend to be sick or well. Whereas in these other ancient traditions, there's an understanding of that whole place in between, where you might be actually quite depleted, not enough that you've got Addison's disease, but some level of adrenal fatigue, which compromises the immune system. So that's an area that we're specifically targeting. And giving women tools to manage their health better, and drawing from traditions where there's a very strong wellness sort of tradition. So in Ayurveda, for example, there are 8 limbs of Ayurveda, and 2 of the limbs have nothing to do with disease. One is about how to make women more fertile and men more virile so they can have healthy progeny. And the other one is called Rasayana, which is how to rejuvenate yourself, how to live well and have good health going into your 80s and 90s. So there's a whole science there of rejuvenation. So bringing those kind of mindsets, herbal medicine, self-care practices like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, for example, yoga, to help people manage their health better and to redress that level of depletion, which often doesn't get redressed. How do you do that? And so, as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned, but I take people to South India, to Ayurvedic health resorts where they can have levels of treatment. And people often say they feel better than they've felt in 25 years. So they've been carrying that level of, and not just women, but men as well, depletion. Not enough that they've got a serious illness, but enough that that they feel, they're not as enjoying life as much as they could be. And so that's our focus, is to teach these online, create a global online community where women can resource each other, and also get ideas and inspiration from each other, as well as from the courses that we'll be running to better manage their health through their lives. So that's the current focus. We're just in the process of building that up.
But that doesn't take 5 years, or it takes more. So that means that you're planning on keeping on for many years. I'm in good health. I'm very lucky. I live near the beach in Sydney, so I surf every day and I do my yoga meditation. So I've got to walk my talk. But I've got a lot of energy for that. And I'm also conscious there'll be other teachers involved. It won't just be, it's not dependent on me. But we're initiating that with my business partner, and
yeah, I'm excited, and I could keep
Yeah.
going for at least another 10 years. So we'll see.
That's great. Yeah.
God willing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my plan is to just continue as long as I find that I'm healthy and that I'm doing a good job. And if I can't tell myself, I've asked my colleagues to tell me if they think I'm, getting old. And but then I have, which I think is one of the reasons that I've enjoyed my work so much, that I've always had a balance in my spare time. So when I was up at the Arctic North, I got a puppy, which happened to be a setter dog, and an English setter, and they are made for hunting grouse in the mountains. I knew nothing about it, but after getting that dog, I got really interested in it, and that has been me and my husband's big occupation. So we are out training these dogs, and we go to competitions, and I have to get home from work early to go for a walk with them every day. And that has made me both physically fit and also mentally, because I can still remember when I had my first anastomotic leak after doing colon surgery. And it went really bad, and the patient died. And as a surgeon, you feel awful. And the next day, I was going off to some competition with my dogs, and in the car I was sitting, thinking about this poor patient and my fault and everything. And driving back home in the evening, my head was just completely changed to why did the dog do this? And I couldn't understand why he did that. I should have done that. I just realized that, that just helps me forgetting about my job and doing something else. And luckily that was quite early on in my career. So I think that that was more O'Brien's as well. Work hard, play hard. That's been my mantra, and for me that has worked well. So when I don't have my job to go for every day, I can do something else with my dogs, my garden, or whatever. So I did my PhD because I want to try and find out why people got cancer. So I did my PhD in diet and epidemiology of colon cancer. And found, found out that red meat would increase the risk of cancer, and the vegetables and antioxidants would reduce it. And then, after doing the PhD, you're expected to do a lot of research. For me, that meant that I had to do that in my spare time, in my evenings. And, there was kind of pressure to become a professor and do an academic career. But then at that stage, I decided that, no, I didn't want to spend my spare time doing scientific work. I wanted to do that if it was something I wanted to find out, something that I was really interested in. So that I've done some, but I've not become a professor. And for me, that was the right thing.
Decision.
Yeah, the right decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, balance, that's such an important thing.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. And I admire our classmates who have done an academic career and poured all their energy into it, because they get good and they get the subject moving on. So I'm so glad that some of us have done that. Yeah.
And Nancy, what's the future looking like for you?
Well, I did retire in 2018, but I've kept busy during that time. I did keep a medical license, and that has enabled me to be a member of the Virginia Medical Reserve Corps, and they call upon us for miscellaneous taskings certainly during COVID, you know, the shots and the testing and all that. But even just, you know, I live right across the river from Washington, D.C. So in the 4th of July, fireworks and everything, they have little medical tents set up, and they call on people like us to come and be there and that sort of thing. So I've kept my hand in it, but I think, you know, as I explained earlier, I never wanted to work as a family practitioner in the U.S. just because I'd gotten spoiled by the State Department. But I have a lot of other hobbies. Hiking, downhill skiing, I still do. Horseback riding.
Yeah.
Is it Kerry
in Kerry,
recently?
Yeah. Just a few days ago.
A few days ago.
Yeah.
And I'm going to turn 70 in September. And for my birthday present, I bought myself a week. Well, it's the Pentagon Ski Club arranged this. I'm going with them. A week in Dominica, an island in the Caribbean, Dominica, of scuba diving.
Wow.
So those are my 3 kind of
sounds good.
dangerous hobbies. No, hobbies that I still pursue. And visiting family and travel and friends and our son, the one son, which, by the way, we need to point this out.
Yeah.
You want to mention it?
Yes.
There's one more thing that we all have in common, and that's we have one son each. Shaun has a son, I have a son, Nancy has a son.
Kismet. But my son lives out in San Francisco. So, you know, getting out there to visit him and stay with him and travel with him, he's wonderful. He's great fun. And he is a son too. So I have a husband, and I have a son, and I have a stepson, and I have a grandson. You know, plenty of
sons.
A lot of male energy.
One of each is enough, you know. But so I keep super busy. I really do. Believe it or not, even though I'm retired. And I know one of the questions suggested for us is, as a retiree, what hot topics do we imagine in medicine? And I was thinking, I don't even think about it but I do. I really do think about it. I'm still licensed. The issues that I see, and maybe it's because I'm coming from where I'm at in my life, is polypharmacy. I get nervous about patients who are on 6, 8, whatever drugs. I'm concerned about that. Also concerned about patient expectations, because we've made life pretty good, but you know, we'll fix it. They'll fix it and get you right back out on whatever. Tempering patient expectations. I can't. I'm embarrassed to say this, but the last 10 years of my practice, I would occasionally say to my patients, "It's a stethoscope, not a magic wand." You know, because because you know, I want to keep you know. And then also the issue, maybe this hasn't. I don't think it's really come. It's come up in a few areas, but when to stop testing for certain conditions. I mean, if you have a healthy 70-year-old, you want to look for certain things that, you know, you have to look at the actuarial tables and what's the life expectancy and quality of life of someone with an A-diagnosed, asymptomatic breast cancer versus a diagnosed, treated breast cancer. You know, you have to start weighing those. So testing. And then one reason I kept my medical license is, you know, if Virginia, the state I'm in, if any kind of legal medical aid in dying laws come along, licensed clinicians are going to be needed for that. And I want to keep my license for that. So those are the hot topics as a retiree that I kind of see. But otherwise, it's, you know, you guys as bailiwick. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah, when to stop treatment, I think, is an important issue. That's a difficult ethical issue. And patients have so different expectancies and they want different things. So I think like that's one thing we've been taught in the college all the time, you know, do a good medical history, listen to the patient, talk to the patient, and you get a lot of information. So I think that makes the choices of what to treat and when to stop treatment makes it easier if you just find out what the patient wants.
all right.
Yeah.
Deep conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things that's I'm kind of working away at, it's a long-term journey, but in Ayurvedic medicine, we say that, you know, we are part of nature. We're not separated from, you know, man or woman versus nature. We are part of nature as much as any plant or or animal. And so it really encourages you to be in harmony with nature, which is other people, outside world, but also yourself. So about cultivating a more harmonious relationship with yourself. And we say that, healing is our very nature. We're actually, it's our birthright, is to heal. So cultivating a listening for your own healing, for your intuition, which is an incredible sort of guide, like an inner GPS that's just designed for you. So a lot of my work is around helping people to listen to their bodies, to listen to their intuition. And that can guide them in all sorts of things, whether it's relationships or food choices or lifestyle choices, etc. When to take on a project, when not to say no. It's not right. So that, I guess, that's a long-term sort of theme in my work, is encouraging people to listen, to listen to their bodies, to listen to their intuition, and to use that, especially in a time when so many people are looking to the internet for guidance, and it can be very confusing. And sometimes what's being said is changing. 5 years ago I've had breast cancer patients, and this was being advocated, and then 10 years later this is being advocated, and they're very confused. So if we can actually come back to this, what's sometimes described as the cosmic computer, incredibly sophisticated, then there's a whole wealth of understanding, knowledge that it's designed for you. So that's my ongoing project.
I like it. That's great.
Yeah.
Goodness. Wow. Let's see what else. Did any of us get married? I can't. Yeah, I did. You got married.
Yeah, I'm married to Jan. He was in the class of 1980, and so he's a RCSI graduate as well, and he works as a general practitioner. We met in college, so we've been married for many years.
Awesome. Yeah. You guys know I had a boyfriend, and he moved into Moosley Hill with me, and we graduated on June 2nd, 1984. And on June 9th, 1984, we got married.
Yeah.
My parents had to arrange the whole thing. I didn't. So we had our 40th wedding anniversary this summer.
Wow.
That's impressive.
It's been a busy 2024.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
I never went down the track of getting married. I was with Bodhi's mum for about 2 years. And we're still really close, very good friends, but we didn't stay together as a couple. But we were both very committed co-parents, and she's a very good friend.
nice.
So that's been good for Bodhi.
Yeah.
That's one thing with you. You stay friendly with your ex-girlfriends and ex-wives.
You had such a rich experience together. Well, why not? And again, that's part of the harmony. Harmony with other people and ex-partners, and I mean, it requires work. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but there's a lot of learning, a lot of richness in that. But it can be a very challenging at times emotionally to work through the issues.
Well, I think you're a great advertisement for whatever kind of medical both of you are. I mean, gosh, patients would say, "Hey, looks good."
I think if you're walking your talk, it speaks loudly to your patients.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I always think that's important. I mean, nutrition. Remember, we all were interested in nutrition.
We were. We ate really well.
We ate really well, and I had a BS undergraduate degree in nutrition because I was worried that I wouldn't learn enough about it in medical school, and it's such an important part of health and well-being.
100%.
Oh yeah. So it was good to glom on with you guys because we weren't going down to the Burger Shack or
No, we never
ate
did
very
that.
well.
We ate very well.
We ate
You
very
made those great burgers out of grated beets, and Chris is still wanting to know Maria's recipe for
Latka? Was it
Well,
latke?
it was like a
the
fake
potato and the
hamburger,
egg.
and a rare one because of the beets. It was
Yeah.
like-
Yeah, well, potato pancakes,
Yeah.
I think, where
Yeah.
it's grated potatoes.
they
great.
were great.
And I think we had a lot of ratatouille as well,
Oh,
eggplant
yeah,
and
the
courgette.
ratatouille.
Yeah, we did all right.
Yeah,
Getting
we did
hungry.
all right. Yeah.
We did all right. We did all right.
We did right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we are very grateful to RCSI for getting us started, and also for the reunions. I mean, every fifth year, the RCSI arranges these reunions. That doesn't happen in Norwegian universities. Then you have to do it yourselves, and you maybe do it once or twice, and then it fades out. But you know, here we are. 40 years since we graduated. Yesterday we met up with how many? 30 classmates in the restaurant, and you know, I can't really explain how great it is, because I think very few can relate to what this is. But it's like being young again and being a student again, and it's just very very great time. So I think that's one very special thing about RCSI.
Here, here.
Right. It's magical. Yeah. So really, anyone listening to this or watching this program, we would highly encourage you to come to your reunion. I mean, it's priceless, as Maria was saying, and a real shot in the arm to lift you. I always feel high coming out of these. They're just wonderful. You step back in time, but you also step into the future too, and knowing that you've absorbed some really good karma from the people that you were with for those years. And so please come to your reunion. You won't regret it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I know I'll be back in 5 years, God willing, and I hope you too will be too.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you much, RCSI.